Ever opened an employee handbook and encountered a rule so magnificently stupid that you wondered if you'd accidentally slipped into an alternate dimension where logic went to die? That precise moment, when rationality evacuates the premises and bureaucratic madness moves in, is what powers this investigation into the darkest corners of workplace culture. We've excavated 50 perfect specimens of organizational insanity, each one a crystallized testament to what happens when fear, control, and a pathological detachment from human experience collide in a conference room. These aren't just rules, they're tiny, perfect monuments to common sense being voted off the island. Fact 1. 1. The Keyboard Activity Surveillance Theat. Call center management installed software monitoring every keystroke with chilling precision. 3 minutes of keyboard inactivity triggered automated warnings and manager notifications. Between calls, employees frantically typed gibberish into blank documents just to keep their activity metrics artificially inflated. The system didn't measure productivity, quality, or actual results. It measured motion, rewarding the theatrical appearance of work over meaningful execution. This surveillance architecture taught a brutal lesson. Looking busy matters infinitely more than being effective. Workers became performers in an absurd theater where typing nonsense became more valuable than thinking clearly, and algorithms replaced human judgment with mechanical surveillance. 2. The Mission Statement Memorization Inquisition. A national retail chain required new employees to memorize a 200-word company mission statement verbatim. Random quizzes administered by managers tested perfect recitation, with failures directly impacting performance reviews. During sales floor lulls, you'd witness employees frantically muttering about synergizing global-local value propositions and empowering stakeholder actualization interfaces. Because apparently, selling toasters requires flawless recitation of corporate poetry, divorced from any comprehensible meaning. The policy valued memorization over understanding, performance over internalization, proving that appearing aligned with company values mattered infinitely more than actually believing or embodying them. It created a workforce skilled in recitation, but hollow in conviction. Corporate parrots without comprehension. 3. The social media surrender. During onboarding at a retail giant, you surrendered more than tax forms and emergency contacts. You surrendered your entire digital identity. Employment conditions required providing links to all personal social media accounts for periodic HR surveillance. That beer photo from your cousin's barbecue? Potentially fireable. Political articles you liked 5 years ago? Career-limiting moves. Your Saturday self became company property, subject to judgment, documentation, and potential termination. This invasion normalized the dystopian concept that employers own your complete identity, not merely your working hours. It cultivated self-censorship and paranoia, where authentic expression became a professional liability, and your off-duty life remained perpetually auditable. 4. The thermostat tyranny. Inside a locked, transparent plastic box hung the key to human comfort. A thermostat permanently frozen at 65 degrees Fahrenheit. One executive, a singular individual who apparently metabolized warmth like an Arctic penguin, determined the atmospheric fate of hundreds. The rest of the workforce huddled in scarves, blankets, and fingerless gloves, transformed into extras from a Dickens adaptation performing 21st century labor. This wasn't about energy efficiency, environmental consciousness, or even office harmony. It was about converting something as fundamental as comfortable temperature into a hierarchical power symbol, a daily physical reminder that your bodily comfort matters less than one person's preference for subarctic productivity conditions. Daylight and warmth became privileges rationed by rank. 5. The unlimited vacation psychological trap. A trendy tech startup advertised unlimited vacation, a seemingly incredible perk framing profound trust in employees. The sinister catch? No official tracking system meant powerful social pressure replaced actual policy. Nobody wanted to be perceived as the person taking too much compared to hyper-competitive colleagues grinding themselves into dust. Anxiety replaced freedom as employees took significantly less time off than under traditional structured policies. The unlimited policy brilliantly exploited human psychology, weaponizing comparison and workplace insecurity. It was magnificently efficient, advertised generous benefits while ensuring peer pressure accomplishes what explicit rules couldn't, keeping people working without mandating it. Trust became surveillance by proxy, and freedom became another performance metric. 6. The 6-minute bladder budget. Some companies impose 6-minute bathroom limits monitored by supervisors or electronic surveillance systems. Basic human biology transforms into a timed performance where exceeding allotted minutes results in pay deductions. What was once a fundamental bodily function became a high-stakes game show, where the grand prize is keeping your entire paycheck intact because you drank water this morning. The system treats bladders like subscription services. You get the trial version, and anything beyond costs extra. OSHA guidelines explicitly prohibit unreasonable restrictions on restroom access. Yet, here we are, timing toilet trips with precision typically reserved for Olympic sprinting. It's micromanagement so invasive, it's honestly impressive in its dehumanization. 7. The mandatory high-five dystopia. In a spectacularly misguided attempt to foster high-energy culture, a tech startup banned all verbal greetings. Official company policy mandated high-fiving every colleague you made eye contact with, an initiative branded kinetic positivity. Hallways transformed into awkward interaction minefields where people carrying hot coffee or laptops contorted themselves into pretzel shapes meeting the requirement. The policy didn't build camaraderie. It taught advanced eye contact avoidance skills as survival mechanisms. Employees became experts at looking absolutely anywhere except at approaching colleagues to spare themselves another joyless, mandatory hand slap. When authentic greeting becomes prohibited and forced physical contact replaces genuine connection, you've successfully murdered spontaneity while claiming to celebrate it. 8. The decorative slide to nowhere. An engineering firm desperate to project innovation installed a giant slide connecting their second and first floors. It dominated recruitment tours, a gleaming symbol of workplace fun, creative thinking, and progressive culture. The brutal reality? Using it was professional suicide. The slide was purely ornamental, a trap for naive new hires. Anyone brave or foolish enough to actually write it was immediately branded unprofessional, childish, and someone not taking responsibilities seriously. It became the perfect metaphor for corporate culture itself. A fun, creative facade concealing a rigid core of unspoken judgment. Authentic playfulness was punished despite being literally built into the architecture, proving that performance matters more than authenticity. 9. The Clear Bag Humiliation Protocol. An Ohio corporate campus instituted mandatory clear bag policies for all employees every single day. Your personal items, prescription medication, worn paperback novels, emergency snacks, tampons became public displays for colleagues and security guards to inspect and judge. Before even reaching your desk, you started each workday feeling like a suspect in an ongoing investigation. This wasn't genuinely about security, it was about creating an atmosphere of suspicion and demonstrating control. The policy normalized treating everyone as potential criminals, simultaneously eroding trust and dignity. When transparency becomes weaponized, privacy dies, and employees internalize the belief that they deserve surveillance because workplaces fundamentally cannot trust them. 10. The Password Torture Protocol. One IT department required password changes every 30 days without exception. The new password couldn't resemble any of the last 24 passwords and needed uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, symbols, and apparently the current lunar phase for good measure. The predictable result? Every single employee wrote passwords on sticky notes hidden under keyboards, completely defeating the policy's entire security purpose. At what point does a security protocol become its own greatest vulnerability? The system created such cognitive complexity that the workaround, physical documentation vulnerable to anyone walking past, became exponentially more dangerous than the problem it supposedly solved. It perfectly illustrated how policies divorced from human behavior create the exact risks they intended to prevent. 11. The Salary Silence Agreement. Don't discuss your salary. The unspoken rule enforced with religious fervor across corporate America. It's brilliantly framed as professionalism and politeness, expertly exploiting our cultural discomfort around money discussions. But strip away the sophisticated veneer and you'll find what it really is: an information embargo wearing business casual attire. By preventing transparency, companies maintain absolute negotiating power while pay disparities remain comfortably hidden in darkness, protected from scrutiny. It's social engineering at its finest, making employees police their own silence, convincing them that knowing their market worth and their colleagues' compensation is somehow vulgar, unprofessional, and socially unacceptable. The silence serves power, not workers. 12. The window blind hierarchy. At one investment firm, sunlight was a privilege reserved for the chosen, not a right extended to the masses. The ability to open or close window blinds was restricted exclusively to senior management. On beautiful sunny days, entire departments were forced to work in artificial twilight because a single executive preferred the dim ambiance for afternoon napping. This wasn't about comfort, energy efficiency, or any rational workplace consideration. It was about converting a fundamental human experience, natural daylight, into another rung on the corporate ladder, another symbol of hierarchical dominance. Before you even opened your laptop, you were reminded that your physical comfort is irrelevant compared to someone else's arbitrary preference. 13. The Planck Power Minute. Twice daily, precisely at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., a gentle chime sounded through the office of a wellness brand. This was the signal for Planck Power Minute, and compliance wasn't optional. All employees, regardless of role, attire, or physical ability, immediately stopped everything, dropped to the floor, and held 60-second planks. The sight of business casual professionals grimacing on carpet became the visual embodiment of performative wellness culture. This wasn't team building, it was scheduled collective humiliation masquerading as health consciousness. The policy interrupted workflow, embarrassed those unable to participate, and transformed exercise into punishment. It exemplified how wellness initiatives divorced from choice become control mechanisms, where health is mandated rather than supported. 14. The Gratitude Whiteboard Theater. A whiteboard materialized overnight in the main hallway with accompanying new rules. Each employee had to write something they were grateful for about the company every single morning. The stated goal was building appreciation culture and positive energy. Week 1 produced things like my paycheck and my great team. Week 2 degraded to the coffee machine and Friday afternoons. By month's end, people scraped the existential barrel with entries like functioning electricity, and chairs that don't collapse. It didn't foster genuine gratitude, it became a public ledger documenting the staff's dwindling creativity and rising sarcasm. Forced positivity breeds resentment, and mandatory thankfulness reveals exactly how little exists to genuinely appreciate. 15. The compliment arms race. A software company mandated that every single question be prefaced with a compliment. No exceptions. You couldn't simply ask if the server had crashed or if the meeting was rescheduled. First, you had to praise John's shirt, his typing speed, his excellent choice of pen, or his adequate breathing technique. This created an escalating arms race of forced positivity where people complimented staplers, adequate font choices, and moderately successful email sends just to extract simple answers. Communication became so painfully awkward that employees simply stopped talking altogether, choosing silence over performance. The policy didn't build positive culture. It constructed a beautifully silent workplace where genuine interaction died beneath an avalanche of mandatory praise, proving forced kindness is just another flavor of control. 16. The Sterile Desk Protocol. To promote a clutter-free mindset, one company required completely barren desks by each day's end. Not just tidy or organized, absolutely sterile. Every pen, every notepad, every personal item had to disappear into locked drawers nightly. Evening cleaning crews conducted inspections, and violators received stern HR emails documenting their infractions. The office transformed from creative workspace to crime scene, meticulously wiped for prints. It erased any sign of human individuality, treating employees as interchangeable machine components rather than unique humans. People weren't trusted to manage their own organizational systems, and the workplace became hostile to any evidence of personality or personalization. When your desk can't reflect your presence, the message is unmistakable. You're temporary and replaceable. 17. The current events censorship. Banning politics at work sounds reasonable until stretched to its most absurd logical conclusion. At one company, no politics evolved into a blanket ban on discussing any current event beyond sporting matches and celebrity weddings. Super Bowl chat was perfectly acceptable. Discussing a new city council recycling proposal meant an HR visit. This wasn't harmony creation. It was information vacuum cultivation, where anything intellectually complex became too dangerous for conversation. The policy infantilized employees, suggesting they couldn't navigate nuanced discussions without institutional supervision. It created an intellectual desert where depth was forbidden and only the shallowest topics were deemed safe, ensuring workers remained isolated from the world beyond office walls. 18. The hallway congregation limit. An Illinois insurance firm implemented a strict two-person maximum for hallway conversations. The official explanation cited productivity concerns and traffic flow management. In practice, it transformed casual colleague encounters into choreographed awkwardness requiring strategic planning. If two people were talking and a third approached, someone had to theatrically exit, as if fleeing a crime scene or avoiding a subpoena. The office stopped feeling collaborative and started resembling a high-security facility where unauthorized assembly triggered immediate dispersal. It didn't boost productivity, it made people feel surveilled, suspicious, and isolated, turning normal human interaction into something requiring constant vigilance and advanced planning. 19. The mandatory birthday subscription tax. A cheerful social committee representative came around on the first of every month collecting voluntary $10 contributions for birthday celebrations. Refusing to pay wasn't technically forbidden, but earned icy stares typically reserved for war criminals and people who microwave fish. So you paid. Every month, without fail. You were essentially paying a monthly subscription fee for 5 minutes of awkward off-key singing and mediocre grocery store sheet cake for someone in a department you'd never heard of. The voluntary fund was anything but. It was social coercion disguised as team spirit. It demonstrated how workplace culture weaponizes peer pressure, turning genuine celebration into mandatory financial participation, where opting out brands you as antisocial and uncooperative. 20. The bereavement bureaucracy. A tech company's bereavement policy achieved a rare feat, combining genuine tragedy with Kafkaesque bureaucracy. To receive paid time off for a close relative's death, employees had to provide an official death certificate. Sounds reasonable until you discover these government documents take weeks to process through bureaucratic systems. One employee, freshly grieving his father's death, fielded daily harassment from HR demanding paperwork while simultaneously planning a funeral and notifying relatives. He eventually took unpaid vacation days to mourn because bureaucratic timelines don't accommodate human grief or family tragedy. The policy perfectly demonstrates how systems designed to protect companies end up punishing people during their darkest, most vulnerable moments. 21. The Doctor's Note Inquisition. Calling in sick at one particular company meant presumed guilt until proven innocent beyond reasonable doubt. Even for simple 24-hour bugs, you were required to drag your feverish, miserable self to a doctor's office for an official note. This meant paying $20 copays just to prove to your boss you actually had a cold and weren't playing hooky to watch daytime television. It was a spectacular waste of time, money, and healthcare resources for everyone involved. Patient, doctor, and clinic staff. The policy demonstrated profound institutional distrust, treating every illness as potential fraud requiring medical verification. It burdened healthcare systems with unnecessary appointments and punished employees for the crime of being human and occasionally getting sick. 22. The personal call exile. One financial firm banned personal calls at desks. Full stop. Employees whispered furtively in stairwells and parking garages, arranging childcare or checking on sick relatives like they were conducting corporate espionage. The exquisite hypocrisy? Managers routinely held loud, lengthy conversations about golf handicaps, dinner reservations, and weekend plans in the middle of the open plan office. Rules applied selectively based on organizational hierarchy, creating a perfect symphony where some voices mattered and others required hiding in architectural margins. It wasn't about productivity or professionalism. It was about demonstrating that personal lives were privileges granted or withheld based on rank. Your humanity was acceptable only when convenient to power structures. 23. The parking lot caste system. A manufacturing plant parking lot was a masterclass in visible corporate hierarchy. Spaces were assigned based strictly on seniority, creating a precise geographic map of the company's power structure. Executives parked in covered garages directly adjacent to entrances. Senior managers got prime spots in the front lot. The vast majority of the workforce was relegated to distant, sun-blasted gravel pits, 10-minute walks from buildings in all-weather conditions. Before even clocking in each morning, you were reminded of your exact position in the organizational food chain. The parking lot taught a daily physical lesson. Your rank determines not just your paycheck, but your physical comfort, your time, and your exposure to the elements. 24. The 3-page mouse requisition. Needing new equipment, even something as simple as a computer mouse, required filling out elaborate 3-page digital forms. These forms then required approval signatures from your direct manager, the department head, and finally someone in IT. The process took an average of 2 weeks, assuming no one was on vacation. The system was so monumentally inefficient that employees found it faster to visit Best Buy, purchase replacements with personal funds, and secretly swap them with broken equipment. It taught that bureaucracy values process over problem solving, and that systems often create more obstacles than solutions. When acquiring a $10 mouse requires more paperwork than actual work does, you've successfully punished productivity. 25. The sickness as weakness culture. Presentism, the unwritten but brutally enforced rule where using sick days signals weakness and poor dedication. You weren't truly dedicated unless you dragged your fever-ridden body into the office to heroically contaminate every available surface. The coughing colleague spreading contagion wasn't treated as a public health biohazard. They were praised for commitment and work ethic. This management philosophy confused martyrdom with productivity, celebrating visible suffering as proof of loyalty. It ignored basic public health logic. One sick person infecting the entire office creates exponentially more lost productivity than a single day of rest would cost. But optics trumped outcomes, and visible suffering became the metric for measuring dedication. 26. The anonymous idea black hole. The anonymous idea box, a cheerful container adorned with a cartoon light bulb, ostensibly meant to encourage employee innovation. At one retail company, it functioned as a psychological pressure valve, and nothing more. Employees submitted thoughtful, well-reasoned suggestions for improving processes, only to watch them disappear into the void, completely ignored. The box wasn't actually for gathering feedback, it created the comforting illusion of being heard without creating any actual obligation for management to listen or implement changes. It was brilliant emotional management. Give people a designated place to vent so they feel acknowledged, then continue exactly as before without changing anything. The box taught a brutal lesson about power. Your ideas don't matter, but we'll let you pretend they might. 27. The Attire Color Compliance Manual. A New York design agency mandated a specific color palette for all employee clothing. Workers received detailed booklets listing approved colors, predominantly muted grays, blues, and beige, to ensure brand consistency and visual harmony. Every morning, highly creative professionals dressed themselves to match office furniture, their personal expression subordinated to becoming walking corporate letterhead. It wasn't about professionalism or creating cohesive aesthetics. It was about systematically erasing individuality until humans became indistinguishable from the carefully curated decor. The policy didn't foster unity or team spirit. It cultivated profound resentment toward the color beige and everything it represented. When your wardrobe becomes another controlled variable in corporate aesthetic management, you're not an employee anymore. You're a branded accessory. 28. The Invisible Tattoo Purge. A major financial institution banned all visible tattoos for everyone, including basement-dwelling data analysts who hadn't seen actual customers in years. The official reasoning cited brand image protection, as if a tasteful ankle butterfly could somehow trigger catastrophic bank runs and collapse entire global financial systems. This policy relic from an era when novelty ties represented peak workplace rebellion persisted stubbornly into modern times. It demonstrated how arbitrary aesthetic judgments become codified policy, systematically punishing personal expression based on outdated cultural anxieties that society largely moved past. The policy wasn't genuinely about professionalism. It was about control masquerading as standards, enforcing conformity long after the world stopped caring about decorative body art. 29. The Great Chair Purge. A Silicon Valley startup, thoroughly drunk on misguided wellness philosophy, banned all chairs overnight. Every single one disappeared in a furniture apocalypse. The theory suggested standing desks would unleash boundless energy, creativity, and magical collaboration. The reality produced an exhausted workforce secretly constructing makeshift thrones from server boxes and staging elaborate walking meetings that coincidentally always ended at the nearest Starbucks. People weren't more productive. They were plotting furniture rebellion and researching workers' compensation claims. After sufficient suffering, the company reintroduced chairs while spinning the entire debacle as a revolutionary social experiment and valuable learning experience. It perfectly illustrated how ideology divorced from physical reality creates policies that punish bodies while claiming to optimize them. 30. The Olfactory Inquisition. The infamous no smelly food rule transforms office kitchens into culinary minefields fraught with social danger. The policy's beautiful subjectivity means one person's delicious microwaved salmon is another person's factory declaration of war and grounds for HR intervention. It creates workplace food shaming and suspicion culture, paranoid glances at microwaves, whispered accusations, passive-aggressive sticky notes. Ultimately, the unelected nose of the office, invariably Carol from HR, holds terrifying, arbitrary power over everyone's lunch breaks. The rule doesn't establish objective standards, it empowers individuals to police others based purely on personal preference and cultural bias. When smell becomes subjective law enforced inconsistently, you create an environment where everyone's lunch is potentially criminal, and cultural food traditions become workplace violations. 31. The CEO's Beard Vendetta. A Midwest food processing plant enforced a strict no beards policy with 0 exceptions. The stated reason wasn't hygiene, which might make actual sense in food production environments, but pure aesthetic preference. The CEO simply didn't like how facial hair looked, considering it fundamentally unprofessional and visually offensive. Dozens of grown men had their beards treated as key performance indicators, evaluated and judged purely by one executive's personal taste preferences. They were packaging sausages while their facial autonomy was being graded like quarterly earnings reports. It's a perfect encapsulation of arbitrary power. When a leader's subjective preferences become codified workplace law, enforced with the same severity as actual safety regulations, you're living in aesthetic dictatorship. 32. The Refrigerator Nutrition Police. A self-appointed wellness committee at a health insurance company conducted weekly refrigerator raids with missionary zeal. This wasn't merely about discarding expired food, it was full-scale nutritional surveillance and judgment. Sodas received frowny face sticky notes, pizza slices got heart disease pamphlets placed ominously on top. The policy didn't encourage healthy choices or support wellness. It created a sophisticated snack black market hidden in desk drawers, file cabinets, and coat pockets. All thanks to a food police state enthusiastically run by Brenda from accounting. When your lunch becomes subject to committee judgment and public shaming, you're not being supported. You're being infantilized and controlled under the thin guise of caring about your well-being. 33. The CC Surveillance Network. A marketing agency implemented a new email policy with supposedly transparent intentions. All emails sent outside your immediate team had to have your manager copied without exception. The stated goal was improving departmental transparency and communication flows. In reality, it was a digital leash and constant surveillance mechanism. Every cross-departmental question, regardless of how trivial or routine, now required a chaperone and witness. Communication experienced a severe chilling effect as nobody wanted to bother their boss with simple queries about printer codes or meeting times. Meanwhile, manager inboxes became toxic wastelands of irrelevant notifications, drowning actual important communications. It wasn't a tool for collaboration. It was a monument to the belief that unwatched employees must be doing something wrong. 34. The coffee machine hostage situation. In one of corporate history's most passive-aggressive power plays, a manager unhappy with team performance didn't confront them directly or provide constructive feedback. Instead, he simply removed the break room coffee machine without warning or explanation. No announcement, no meeting, no discussion. One morning it was just gone. Vanished. It was silent collective punishment eloquently saying what he wouldn't articulate. Your work isn't good enough to deserve caffeine access. The action communicated contempt and disappointment more effectively than any words possibly could. It demonstrated how petty authority becomes when direct communication fails, turning basic workplace amenities into weapons of disapproval and punishment. When your coffee access depends on performance metrics, you're learning that comfort is always conditional. 35. The Personality Purge. A major electronics retailer forbade any personal items on desks whatsoever. No family photos, no novelty mugs, no little green army men. The official reason cited creating a clean, uniform look and professional appearance. But the policy effectively erased any sign of human individuality from workspaces, treating people as problems. It treated employees not as unique humans with lives and identities, but as interchangeable machine components in a larger apparatus. Management wanted sterile environments and got them, in every soul-crushing, dehumanizing sense of the phrase. When you can't display any sign of personality or life beyond work, you're being told your humanity is inconvenient, unwelcome, and incompatible with productivity. The workspace becomes a void where nothing personal survives inspection. 36. The talking stick infantilization. To make meetings more inclusive, orderly, and democratic, a logistics company manager introduced a new tool for all team discussions, a talking stick. It was a brightly painted piece of wood, and the rule was devastatingly simple. Only the person physically holding the stick could speak. This transformed urgent brainstorming sessions into slow, agonizing rituals that wasted billable hours. Important ideas were lost while the stick passed ceremonially around tables, and every professional in the room was reduced to a kindergartner waiting patiently for their turn. It demonstrated how equality measures can infantilize when applied without nuance or common sense. When you need a physical object to grant speaking permission, you're not creating structure. You're insulting intelligence and systematically wasting time. The stick became a symbol of misguided control masquerading as fairness. 37. The public peer review trap. Peer reviews were mandatory annual rituals at a software company, but with a particularly twisted innovation. The reviews weren't anonymous. You rated teammates on 1 to 5 scales and provided detailed written feedback they and your manager would read verbatim. This created a beautiful cocktail of paranoia, resentment, and fake positivity poisoning team dynamics. Nobody wanted to be the person who torpedoed a colleague's bonus or promotion prospects. The system was perfectly designed to destroy trust and honest communication while appearing to value transparent input. It taught people to lie strategically rather than communicate honestly, inflating ratings to avoid social consequences. When transparency becomes weaponized against candor, feedback becomes worthless, and workplace relationships devolve into transactional calculations based on fear. 38. The self-incrimination performance review. A marketing agency's annual review process included a mandatory self-criticism section that was pure entrapment. Employees were required to list 3 personal failures or weaknesses from the past year in writing. This wasn't constructive self-reflection or professional development. It was a bureaucratic trap. Your honest admissions inevitably became ammunition used against you in salary negotiations and promotion discussions months later. It was corporate judo executed flawlessly, forcing employees to craft the very weapons that would later be used to shoot them down. The brilliance was in its ruthless efficiency. Why should management dig for your shortcomings when you'll voluntarily document them yourself? It cultivated a workforce trained to either lie strategically or sabotage their own advancement, neither of which actually serves performance improvement. 39. The mandatory desktop branding. Your computer desktop, one tiny patch of digital real estate you might reasonably call your own, was forbidden territory at a data analytics firm. All employees were required to use the exact same pre-approved corporate desktop background. A low-resolution company logo on a lifeless blue gradient. No photos of family, dogs, or scenic beaches were permitted. It was a digital uniform designed to ensure that even your subconscious visual field was branded with corporate identity every waking moment. When personal space extends to literally 0 pixels, you're being told that even your digital environment must exclusively serve company interests. The policy eliminated any visual reminder of life beyond work, keeping focus perpetually captured and preventing mental escape. Its control extending into the smallest corners of experience. 40. The forced social media ghost town. A telecommunications company created an internal social platform to boost engagement, collaboration, and cross-departmental synergy. Usage was mandatory. 3 posts weekly minimum, tracked and reported to managers. The result was a digital wasteland filled with the most painfully generic content imaginable. Forced happy birthday messages, awkward project updates, stock photos of people shaking hands. Nobody genuinely wanted to be there, and the content quality reflected that crushing reality. The platform became a monument to manufactured connection, where authentic communication died beneath quotas and constant surveillance. It demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding. You cannot mandate genuine engagement through policy. Instead, you create resentment and teach people to perform interaction while feeling nothing, a skill remarkably similar to what dystopian novels warned us about. 41. The meeting quota madness. A department within a massive healthcare organization instituted meeting quotas with mathematical precision. Every project manager was required to schedule and personally attend a minimum of 10 meetings per week to foster collaboration and communication. This, predictably, spawned a plague of completely pointless meetings devoid of actual content. Calendars filled with hour-long blocks where people sat in rooms staring at each other, desperately inventing reasons for being there just to satisfy meaningless metrics. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of digging holes and immediately filling them back in. Motion without meaning. The policy valued appearance over substance, ensuring time was wasted systematically and productivity actively punished. When you mandate meetings regardless of necessity, you don't get collaboration, you get exhausted people resenting every scheduled block. 42. The climate control civil war. A blanket ban on personal fans and heaters citing power grid stability and fire safety concerns locked a large corporation in permanent internal civil war. The office split into warring factions. Perpetually cold employees bundled in scarves and blankets like polar explorers, and perpetually hot colleagues sweating through shirts. 0% of the workforce was comfortable at any given moment. Mathematical perfection in shared misery. The policy prioritized uniformity over accommodating individual needs, creating an environment where everyone suffered equally. It perfectly captured corporate thinking. Rather than accommodate normal human variation, eliminate the possibility of personal adjustment entirely. The result was a workplace where physical discomfort became normalized background noise to productivity, and nobody could optimize their own environment. 43. The daily desk scramble. Hot desking turned every workday at one tech company into a brutal game of musical chairs. With no permanent desks assigned, each morning became a mad competitive scramble, finding empty spots and setting up entire workstations from scratch. The workforce transformed into digital nomads within their own building, perpetually unsettled with no sense of place or permanence. It was designed by someone who genuinely believed personal space was a software bug rather than a fundamental human feature. The policy eliminated any territorial comfort or stability, ensuring everyone remained perpetually displaced and anxious. When you can't establish even the smallest physical claim to space, you're reminded constantly that you're temporary, replaceable, and fundamentally undeserving of stability or belonging in this environment. 44. The 6-month prophecy requirement. A large logistics company didn't let you request vacation time. You had to prophesy it with supernatural precision. All time off requests required a minimum of 6 months advance notice, no exceptions. Want to attend your cousin's wedding in 5 months? Too late. The corporate calendar has already declared that a mandatory workday for you. Found a great last-minute flight deal? Forget it completely. The policy treated personal lives like container ships, requiring half-year scheduling with non-negotiable contents. It eliminated spontaneity and flexibility entirely, demanding impossible clairvoyance. Life doesn't operate on 6-month forecasts, but the company demanded employees predict their futures with precision anyway. When bureaucracy requires predicting your future with impossible accuracy, you learn that your time was never really yours to begin with. 45. The Gilded Lunch Cage. A Chicago law firm had an unwritten but fiercely enforced rule: never leave the office for lunch. Ever. To facilitate this containment, they provided a heavily subsidized, genuinely high-quality cafeteria with excellent food. On the surface, it seemed like a generous perk showing employee care, but its real purpose was tethering every employee to the building for entire days, systematically eliminating any chance of mental reset or external perspective. It was a gilded cage where the price of cheap, delicious sandwiches was your midday freedom and autonomy. The perk masked control, keeping bodies physically present, minds perpetually focused, and any opportunity for refreshing distance completely eliminated. When benefits serve containment rather than support, they stop being perks and become velvet handcuffs. 46. The Punctuality Theater. You couldn't just arrive on time at this law firm. You had to arrive exactly on time to the minute. Company culture, driven by a pathologically punctual partner, treated punctuality like a moral virtue equivalent to honesty. Arriving 5 minutes early was considered unproductive loitering. 2 minutes late was a cardinal sin requiring explanation. This forced dozens of highly paid lawyers to sit in parking lot cars watching clocks obsessively, timing their entrances with stopwatch precision. It wasn't about professionalism or respect for time. It was about control so precise it systematically eliminated all human variability. When punctuality becomes performance art requiring stopwatch accuracy, you've transformed basic timeliness into psychological torture and turned arrival time into anxiety. 47. The Physical Presence Performance. At a certain law firm, finishing your assigned work didn't earn you freedom or flexibility. You remained physically present at your desk until exactly 6 p.m., regardless of task completion or productivity. This created a workforce of highly paid professionals mastering the subtle art of looking busy, staring intently at completed documents, slowly rereading answered emails, meticulously reorganizing desktop icons for the 5th time that afternoon. The policy measured posture and endurance, not productivity or results. It demonstrated fundamental distrust. If you're not visibly present, you're not actually working. Time became more valuable than output, teaching people to waste hours performing presence rather than achieving meaningful results. It's security theater applied to productivity. 48. The 99-cent rejection letter. A tech giant's expense report policy achieved legendary status for its militant, almost religious pedantry. You could successfully manage $5 million projects with multiple stakeholders, but missing an itemized receipt for a 99-cent cup of coffee would trigger entire report rejection. This launched multi-day email chains involving you, your manager, stern accounting figures, and escalating frustration. The system trusted you with fortunes, but not with single dollars, a paradox revealing organizational priorities. It demonstrated how bureaucracy systematically values process over common sense, where following procedures matters infinitely more than actual results or proportionality. The policy taught that small mistakes carry disproportionate consequences, cultivating fear and paralysis around even the most minor decisions. 49. Mandatory fun, the hostage situation. Two words locked in mortal philosophical combat. Mandatory fun. Companies require attendance at after-hours team-building events, weekend picnics, and voluntary celebrations. These aren't genuine celebrations or parties, they're compulsory performances of enthusiasm under management's constantly watchful gaze. Your precious free time transforms into another metric judging your team player credentials and cultural fit. You're forced into awkward small talk conversations with Brenda from accounting while pretending a soggy hamburger and flat beer constitute entertainment. Research consistently confirms these forced positivity rituals often actively decrease morale, breeding resentment and accelerating burnout. It's fundamentally a hostage situation where the ransom demanded is your authentic self, and refusing participation brands you as insufficiently devoted to corporate family values. 50. The pen authoritarianism. At a government administrative office, employees were strictly forbidden from using their own pens under any circumstances. Every worker was issued a standard-issue, low-quality black ballpoint pen from the supply closet. Getting caught using your own superior pen, perhaps a smooth-writing gel pen you actually enjoyed using, meant formal reprimands for unauthorized office equipment. This wasn't genuinely about budget constraints, security protocols, or visual uniformity. It was about systematically stripping away the last tiniest molecule of personal preference in a place demanding absolute conformity to institutional standards. When you can't even choose your own writing instrument, you're being taught that individuality at any scale is fundamentally unacceptable and incompatible with organizational function. The pen policy represented the final frontier of control. If they'll regulate your pen, they'll regulate anything. We've navigated 50 circles of corporate hell, each one a perfect monument to bureaucratic madness, but one stands triumphantly above the rest in sheer ridiculousness and soul-crushing absurdity. The Planck Power Minute wins our dubious honor for combining physical discomfort, public humiliation, and complete workflow interruption into one perfect 60-second microcosm of performative wellness culture. It exemplifies everything fundamentally wrong with mandatory workplace culture: the complete disregard for individual physical ability, the prioritization of appearance over substance, and the transformation of health consciousness into punishment and control. That twice-daily chime didn't build team spirit, camaraderie, or genuine wellness. It built collective resentment, one grimacing plank at a time, teaching employees that their bodies existed to perform corporate values, regardless of personal capacity or comfort. When exercise becomes mandatory theater, wellness dies and compliance takes its place.